Thomas, you're overreacting. It was one mistake. Just get over it already. Those were the words my wife of 34 years said to me as I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her scramble to cover herself with our duvet. The man beside her, my business partner of 26 years, Richard, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just stared at me with this odd mixture of defiance and resignation, like he'd been caught stealing cookies from a jar, not destroying 3 decades of friendship and trust. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't demand explanations or hurl accusations. I simply turned around, walked down the stairs of the house we'd built together in Vancouver, got into my truck, and drove away. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, everything was collapsing. Let me back up a bit. My name is Thomas Whitmore, and at 63 years old, I thought I had life figured out. Margaret and I had met in university. She was studying education. I was in business administration. We married young, had our daughter Claire when I was 29, and built what I thought was an unshakable partnership, not just in marriage, but in every sense of the word. 26 years ago, Richard Pemberton and I started Whitmore and Pemberton Construction Limited. We specialized in residential renovations and custom homes throughout the Lower Mainland. We weren't the biggest outfit in town, but we had a solid reputation. 32 employees, steady contracts, good margins. Richard handled the on-site operations and client relations. I managed the business side accounting, contracts, supplier relationships. Richard and his wife Helen had been part of our lives for decades. Our families vacationed together. Our kids grew up together. Claire and their son David were the same age, went to the same schools. When Helen's mother died 5 years ago, Margaret was there every single day helping her through it. That's the kind of closeness we had, or so I thought. The day I caught them was supposed to be a good day. I'd closed a major contract with a developer for a 12-unit townhouse project in Burnaby. It was going to carry us through the next 18 months. Easy. I'd left the office early, around 2 in the afternoon, planning to surprise Margaret. Maybe take her to that Italian restaurant she loved on Commercial Drive. Celebrate a little. Richard had actually stopped me on my way out. "Hey, Tommy, heading home already? Want to grab a pint at the Irish Heather? My treat." I'd declined, told him I wanted to get home to Margaret. He'd clapped me on the shoulder, said something about me being a lucky man. I remember thinking how fortunate I was to have a business partner who was also a true friend. The universe has a sick sense of humor sometimes. Our house sat on a quiet street in North Vancouver, a craftsman-style home we'd renovated ourselves 15 years earlier. Margaret's car was in the driveway. So was Richard's truck. My first thought was something must be wrong, an emergency, maybe. Richard never came to our house during work hours. I walked in through the front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it muffled voices from upstairs. Laughter. Margaret's laugh, the one she used to give me. Every step up those stairs felt like walking through concrete. Part of me already knew. The human brain is strange, that way it can piece together a truth before you're consciously ready to accept it. I pushed open our bedroom door, the door we'd picked out together at a salvage yard in Gastown. The room where we'd talked about our dreams, our worries, our future. The room where we'd comforted each other through Claire's teenage rebellion and my father's death. And there they were. Margaret saw me first. Her eyes went wide. "Thomas, you're not supposed to be home." "Not, I'm sorry. Not, this isn't what it looks like." Just shocked that I'd interrupted. Richard sat up, and for a split second, I thought he might try to explain, to apologize. Instead, he just sighed, like this was an inconvenience. "Thomas, listen," he started. I held up my hand. I didn't trust myself to speak. I pulled out my phone, took one photograph, just one, for my records, and left. Behind me, I heard Margaret calling my name, her voice rising in panic. But I kept walking. I drove to Stanley Park and sat in the parking lot near Third Beach for hours, watching the waves roll in. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Margaret, calls from Richard. I ignored them all. Finally, as the sun started to set, I drove to my buddy Eric's place in Kitsilano. Eric Chen and I had known each other since high school. He was a divorce lawyer now, though I'd never thought I'd need his services personally. He took one look at my face and handed me a beer. "What happened?" I told him. "The whole thing." He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Where are you sleeping tonight?" "Not going back there. Guest room's yours. And Thomas, first thing tomorrow, we document everything. Bank accounts, business accounts, property, all of it. before anyone has a chance to move money or hide assets. I nodded. I was numb, operating on autopilot. Eric's wife, Diane, made up the guest room and left me alone. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just lay there, replaying the last 34 years in my mind, wondering what I'd missed. What signs had been there that I'd been too blind to see? My phone buzzed around 2 in the morning. A text from Margaret. "Thomas, please, we need to talk." It was one time. I made a mistake. Richard made a mistake. But we can fix this. Don't throw away everything we've built over one stupid mistake. You're being too emotional. Please come home so we can discuss this rationally. I stared at that message for a long time. Too emotional. I was too emotional about catching my wife in bed with my best friend and business partner. The audacity of it made me almost laugh. Almost. The next morning, Eric and I went to my bank. I had signing authority on all our accounts, personal and business. I didn't clean them out, but I moved half of everything from our joint accounts into a new personal account in my name only. It was within my legal rights. Then we went to the business. Richard's truck wasn't there yet. Good. I let myself into our office, and started going through files. Financial records, specifically. Eric had suggested I look for irregularities, anything that might indicate problems beyond the affair. What I found made my blood run cold. Our company had a dedicated account for client entertainment and business development. It was supposed to cover things like taking clients to dinner, golf tournaments, that sort of thing. Normal business expenses. I pulled up the statements for the last 18 months. $78,000. Gone. Charged to that account. But as I dug deeper, cross-referencing with our actual client meetings and entertainment events, I couldn't account for more than $15,000 of it. $63,000 missing. I pulled the detailed transaction reports. Restaurants I'd never heard of. Hotels in Whistler. A jewelry store charge for $8,000 that I definitely hadn't authorized. All signed off by Richard, since he managed that side of things. My hands shook as I printed everything out. I called Eric. "Found something? You need to see this." While I waited for him, I kept digging. There were emails, too. Between Richard's company email and Margaret's personal account. They'd been sloppy, hadn't even tried to hide it. I suppose when you think you're smarter than everyone around you, you get careless. One email from 6 months ago. "Can't wait for next weekend. Same hotel in Whistler? I'll book the suite. T will never suspect anything, he's too busy with the Burnaby project." Another from Margaret, 3 months ago. "Used the credit card for the bracelet. Told T I saved up from my part-time income." He believed it. They'd been planning this. Using marital money. Using business money. For how long? I scrolled back further. The first suspicious charge was from 22 months ago. Almost 2 years. 2 years of lies. Eric arrived with a forensic accountant named Patricia Lopez. She was a stern woman in her 50s who took one look at the papers I'd spread across my desk and got to work. By lunchtime, she'd traced the spending pattern. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to be clear about something. This isn't just infidelity. This is embezzlement. Your business partner has been systematically defrauding the company. If even a portion of these charges are personal rather than business-related, you have grounds for criminal charges in addition to civil remedies." I sat down heavily. Richard, my friend for over 4 decades, the man who'd been best man at my wedding, who'd been in the delivery room waiting area when Claire was born, who'd helped me spread my mother's ashes in the Fraser River when she passed. This man had been stealing from me, from us, from the company we'd built together. My phone rang. It was Richard. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text. "Tommy, we need to talk. Please. I know you're at the office. I can explain everything." I showed the text to Eric. He took my phone and typed out a response. "Contact my lawyer. All communication goes through him from now on. Do not come to the office. Do not contact me directly." He sent it, then handed the phone back. "You need to protect yourself, both personally and in the business. This is going to get ugly." He wasn't wrong. By that evening, we'd locked Richard out of the business accounts, changed passwords, revoked access. I called an emergency meeting with our lawyer, the corporate one, not Eric, and explained the situation. He advised me to consult with the board. We didn't have a traditional board, but we did have 3 silent investors who held 20% of the company between them. They needed to know. I spent the next 2 days in meetings. The investors were furious. One of them, Graham McLeod, a retired contractor in his 70s, actually suggested we press criminal charges immediately. I was hesitant, though. Criminal charges would make this public. Our reputation would take a hit. Our clients would worry. It could sink the company. But Patricia was insistent. If you don't report this, and it comes out later that you knew and covered it up, you could face legal consequences yourself. You have a fiduciary duty to the company and to the investors. She was right. We filed a report with the police, White Collar Crime Division. They opened an investigation. Meanwhile, Margaret wouldn't stop trying to contact me. She'd left 47 messages on my phone. 47. Each one more desperate than the last. She'd gone from dismissive to apologetic to angry to pleading. I didn't respond to any of them. On the third day, I finally went home, our home, but only with Eric present. I needed to get some clothes and personal items. Margaret was there, waiting. She'd obviously been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. Part of me, a very small, very stupid part, wanted to comfort her. 34 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. Thomas, please, can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about, Margaret. It was a mistake. We got close, Richard and I. After you were so busy with the Burnaby project last year, and I was feeling lonely, and Helen was visiting her sister in Toronto for 3 months, and it just happened. For 2 years? It just happened for 2 years? She blinked. How did you... The credit cards, Margaret. The hotel stays. The jewelry. I found it all. And that's not even mentioning the $63,000 Richard stole from the company. Our company. Money that was supposed to be for Claire's future, for our retirement. Her face went pale. I didn't know about that. I swear, Thomas, I didn't know he was taking money from the business. But you knew he was spending money on you. Money that didn't come from his own pocket. You had to know something was off. She didn't have an answer for that. I grabbed a suitcase, filled it with clothes and essentials, and left again. Eric followed silently. We didn't speak on the drive back to his place. That night, my phone rang at 10 p.m. It was Helen, Richard's wife. I answered. Thomas, it's Helen. I need to talk to you. Her voice was thick with tears. I felt a wave of guilt. Helen was innocent in all this. She was a victim, too. I'm so sorry, Helen. No, Thomas. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have told you sooner. I found out 2 months ago. I saw text messages on Richard's phone. When I confronted him, he said it was over, that it had been a one-time thing, that he'd ended it. I wanted to believe him. I didn't want to blow up both our families, so I stayed quiet. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes. Helen had known. For 2 months, she'd known, and she'd stayed silent. I understood why. God knows I understood, but it still stung. Helen, it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. I have information about the money. Richard kept records. He thought I didn't know where he hid things, but I've been married to him for 36 years. I know every hiding spot in that house. I want to help. I want to make this right. 2 days later, Helen came to Eric's office with a box of documents. Bank statements, receipts, credit card bills, everything. She'd also brought a flash drive with emails Richard had stupidly saved to the home computer. It was damning. All of it. He took David's university fund, she said quietly. $22,000 for a trip to Hawaii with Margaret last April when he told me he was at a contractors conference in Vegas. I remembered that trip. Margaret had told me she was visiting her sister in Ontario. Our lies had been carefully synchronized. The investigation moved quickly after that. The police had enough evidence to charge Richard with fraud and embezzlement. The lawyers started proceedings to dissolve the business partnership and force Richard to sell his shares. The investors wanted him out, immediately. With Richard's criminal charges, we had grounds to buy him out at a significantly reduced value. He was going to lose everything. But I was losing things too. Claire, my daughter, wasn't speaking to me. Margaret had gotten to her first, framed the whole situation as me being vindictive and cruel, throwing away a marriage over a single mistake. Claire was 34, old enough to understand nuance, but she was also her mother's daughter. She called me one evening, angry. Dad, how can you do this to Mom? She made a mistake, yes, but you're destroying her life. She's talking about losing the house. And Uncle Richard? You're pressing charges? He was your best friend. Uncle Richard. She'd called him that her whole life. Claire, there's a lot you don't know. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was 2 years. And Richard stole money from the company. A lot of money. Mom says you're lying about that. that you're making it up to justify what you're doing. I felt something crack inside me. I have bank statements, police reports. Your mother is lying to you, Claire. No, no, you're the one who's changed. You're being cold and cruel, and I don't even recognize you anymore. I need some space from you right now, Dad. She hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. Eric found me sitting in the dark in his guest room an hour later. You okay? I lost my daughter. You didn't lose her. She's confused and hurt. Give her time. But time felt like something I was running out of. Over the next few weeks, everything I'd built seemed to crumble. The divorce papers were filed. Margaret was contesting everything, claiming she deserved half the business value despite the affair. The company was bleeding money from legal fees. 2 of our long-term clients had pulled contracts, worried about the instability. Our reputation was taking hits in the industry. And I was living in my lawyer's guest room at 63 years old, sleeping 3 hours a night, barely eating. One bright spot emerged, though. Helen had filed for divorce as well. She and I started meeting for coffee occasionally, not for any romantic reason, but because we were the only 2 people who truly understood what the other was going through. We were both dealing with the same betrayal, the same sense of our entire lives being rewritten without our consent. Do you ever wonder if we missed signs? She asked one afternoon at a cafe in Kitsilano. If we were blind, or stupid, or every single day. But I don't think we were stupid. I think we trusted the people we loved. That's not stupidity. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. She nodded. David isn't speaking to me. He thinks I should have tried harder to save the marriage, that I gave up too easily. I understood that pain. Claire still wouldn't take my calls. The legal proceedings dragged on. Richard's criminal trial was set for 4 months out. The business partnership dissolution moved faster. By week 8, we had a settlement. Richard would sell his 50% stake back to the company for 30 cents on the dollar. The investors and I would split it. He'd also agreed to a payment plan for the embezzled money, though I doubted we'd ever see most of it. His assets were being seized. His house was going into foreclosure, and Helen was getting her share in the divorce. The man who'd had everything was about to have nothing. I should have felt satisfaction. I didn't. I just felt tired. Margaret's divorce proceedings were nastier. She wanted the house, half my business stake, and spousal support. Her lawyer argued that she'd sacrificed her career to support mine, that she deserved compensation. My lawyer countered with evidence of the affair and her knowledge of the embezzlement, which she'd benefited from. We ended up in mediation. I walked into that conference room in downtown Vancouver and saw Margaret sitting there with her lawyer. She looked older, thinner, tired. For a moment, I saw the girl I'd married 40 years ago, the one who'd laughed at my terrible jokes and believed in me when I wanted to start my own business. Then I remembered the words. It was one mistake. Get over it. The mediation lasted 6 hours. In the end, we reached a settlement. Margaret would get the house, but she'd have to buy me out of my 50% equity over 5 years. No spousal support beyond that. She'd get half of my pension. I'd keep my full business stake. We'd split our savings. It wasn't perfect, but it was done. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in November, almost 5 months after I'd walked into that bedroom. The judge signed the papers, and just like that, 34 years of marriage dissolved. I walked out of the courthouse, into the rain, got into my truck, and drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove. Up the Sea to Sky Highway, through Squamish, past Whistler. I drove until I reached Pemberton, then pulled over at a viewpoint overlooking Mount Currie. The mountains were dusted with early snow. The valley stretched out below, vast and indifferent to human drama. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the number was unfamiliar. Hello? Dad? Claire. My heart stopped. I'm here, sweetheart. I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere? We agreed on a restaurant in Gastown, neutral ground. I drove back to Vancouver, got there early, and waited. When Claire walked in, I saw she'd been crying. She sat down across from me, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. Mom told me everything, she finally said. The real timeline. About the money. She broke down last week and told me the truth. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I reached across the table and took her hand. You were protecting your mother. I understand that. No, I was being unfair to you. You've always been honest with me, and I should have trusted that. I should have listened. We talked for 3 hours. I told her everything, not to turn her against Margaret, but because she deserved the truth. She told me about the last few months, how Margaret had spiraled, drinking too much, crying constantly, admitting more and more details about the affair and the money. She said the worst thing was losing you, that Richard was never worth it, that she didn't even love him. It was just excitement, I guess, feeling wanted. But she said she realized too late that she'd traded something real for something fake. Do you talk to Richard's kids? David won't speak to anyone. He's taking it really hard. Emma, though we had coffee last week, she's furious at both her dad and at Mom. She said some things I can't unhear about her dad. We parted that evening with a hug, the first one in 5 months. She promised to call more, to stay in touch. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Over the next year, I rebuilt. The company stabilized. We rebranded as Whitmore Construction Limited, just my name now. Brought on a new operations manager, a sharp woman in her 40s named Kira Sandhu, who'd worked in commercial construction for 20 years. She was professional, competent, and had zero personal connection to my past drama. Perfect. We landed new contracts. Reputation slowly recovered. The business didn't just survive, it grew. By 18 months after the divorce, we had 45 employees and a backlog of projects stretching into the next 2 years. I sold the company shares I'd bought from Richard to the investors at a profit. Used that money to buy a small condo in False Creek with a view of the water. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, just mine. Helen and I stayed friends. She'd moved to Victoria, bought a little house near the water, and started teaching art classes to seniors. She seemed lighter, somehow, despite everything. We'd video chat once a month, comparing notes on our kids, our lives, our slow process of healing. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked me once. "Blowing everything up instead of trying to work it out?" I thought about it. No, because working it out would have meant living with the knowledge that neither of them respected me enough to tell the truth. I couldn't do that. I couldn't live the rest of my life wondering if they were still lying to me. She nodded. "I think about that too. David keeps saying I should have fought for my marriage. But you can't fight for something when the other person already decided you're not worth being honest with." At 65, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates arranged through friends. It felt strange, almost like learning to walk again. But there was one woman, Patricia, not the accountant, different Patricia, a retired school principal who loved hiking and had a laugh that reminded me of mountain streams. We took things slow, very slow, but it was nice to have companionship again. Claire was part of my life again, regularly. She'd moved back to Vancouver after a few years working in Toronto, and we'd have dinner every couple of weeks. She told me once, over wine, that watching what happened to her mother had changed how she viewed relationships. I used to think love was enough, that if you loved someone, you could get through anything. But now I know trust is more important than love. You can love someone and still not be able to trust them, and without trust, love isn't enough. She was wiser than I'd been at her age. Richard served 8 months in minimum security for the fraud charges. He plea bargained, showed remorse, agreed to make restitution. When he got out, he left British Columbia entirely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was somewhere in Alberta, working construction labor jobs. David had cut him off completely. Emma sent him the occasional email but wouldn't see him in person. Margaret still lived in the house, our house in North Vancouver. I'd drive by sometimes, not to see her, but because it was on the way to certain job sites. The garden I'd planted had grown wild. The paint was starting to peel. She'd put it on the market twice, but couldn't get her asking price. The housing market had shifted, and the area wasn't as desirable as it once was. I heard from Claire that Margaret had gone back to teaching part-time at an elementary school, that she'd joined a church group and was in therapy, that she'd told Claire she'd give anything to go back and make different choices. But you can't go back. That's the thing about betrayal. It's not just about what was broken, but about what can never be restored. The innocence of trust, the foundation of shared history. Once those are gone, you can't rebuild them. You can only build something new somewhere else. On my 66th birthday, Patricia threw me a small party at her place in Burnaby. Just close friends, Eric and Diane, Kira from work, a few other people I'd gotten to know over the past few years. Claire came with her new boyfriend, a kind man named James who worked in sustainable architecture. Helen drove up from Victoria. At one point, I stepped out onto Patricia's balcony to get some air. The city lights spread out below, twinkling in the dark. Claire joined me. "You doing okay, Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart. I really am. I'm proud of you. you know, for how you handled everything, for not becoming bitter. I thought about that. Was I bitter? Maybe a little, deep down in places I didn't like to examine too closely, but mostly I was grateful. Grateful that I discovered the truth before wasting more years. Grateful for the friends who'd stood by me. Grateful that Claire and I had found our way back to each other. You know what I've learned? I said. Life is going to knock you down. People you trust will disappoint you, hurt you, betray you. That's just the reality of being human and being around other humans. But you get to choose what you do next. You can stay down, or you can get back up. You can let the betrayal define you, or you can define yourself by how you respond to it. She leaned her head on my shoulder. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just old and stubborn. She laughed. Looking back now, from this vantage point of years past and wounds scarred over, I can see the lessons embedded in all that pain. Margaret was right about one thing. It was just once. Once that she destroyed everything we'd built. Once that she showed me who she really was underneath the person I thought I knew. And Richard? He'd been my friend. Yes, but friendship, like marriage, is built on trust and respect. Without those, it's just a word. The hardest lesson was accepting that I'd never get closure in the way I wanted. There would be no moment where Margaret or Richard would truly understand the full weight of what they'd done. No grand apology that would make it all make sense. They'd live their lives with their own narratives, their own rationalizations, and I had to be okay with that. What I could control was my own narrative, my own choices, my own definition of who I was and what I stood for. I'm 68 now. The company is thriving. Patricia and I got married last year, nothing big, just a small ceremony at the Bludel Conservatory with our closest friends and family. Claire is expecting her first child, my first grandchild, in 3 months. Helen is happy in Victoria, painting watercolors and volunteering at a women's shelter. I still see Margaret occasionally, from a distance. At Claire's wedding 2 years ago, we were cordial, civil, nothing more. The decades we shared exist somewhere in the past, like a story I read about someone else's life. Richard, I haven't seen since before the trial. I don't know if I ever will. Part of me hopes he's found some peace, found a way to live with what he did. But that's his journey, not mine. Mine is here, now. In this life, I've rebuilt from the rubble of what was. It's not the life I planned. It's not the life I imagined during those early years with Margaret, when everything seemed possible and forever seemed real. But it's mine. It's honest. It's built on truth rather than comfortable lies. And that, I've learned, is worth more than any shared history, any preserved reputation, any illusion of a perfect life. When you catch someone showing you their true character, believe them. Don't make excuses. Don't rationalize. Don't convince yourself you're overreacting. Their actions are telling you a story, listen to it. And then, with whatever strength you can muster, make the choices that honor your own dignity and worth. The betrayal isn't yours to carry. The lies aren't yours to defend. The broken trust isn't yours to repair. You just have to decide who you're going to be in the aftermath. That's the only thing you can control, and it's the only thing that really matters. Get over it? No. You don't get over betrayal like it's a speed bump. You go through it, around it, under it if you have to. You survive it, and eventually, if you're lucky and you work at it, you build something better on the other side. That's what I did. And if an old man like me can do it, anyone can.